Hey, and good afternoon. We are live today from Charlotte, North Carolina, and I'm here with Katy Annulli. And this is the beginning of a new year, and she's going to help us organize our kitchens. What? Our kitchens? I know. We spend lots of time in our kitchens, and this is the year that defines us. And so this is the year that we're going to go room by room through all the different areas of our lives, and we are going to figure out how it best represents us, get rid of the things that we're not using, things that, I don't know, maybe at one time or another we spent a lot of money on them and we thought we needed them, but maybe we find that as time goes by, we're not cooking as much as we once were, or we're not using those particular small appliances. And so today, with Katy's help, we're going to walk through the kitchen virtually, where she's going to explain a lot of stuff to us. And I'm hoping that it will trigger some ideas for you. Okay. I want you to be really honest with yourself as we have this conversation today and say, is that me? Does my pantry need that kind of help? Do my cupboards need that kind of help? Do I have stuff on top of my cupboards that need this kind of help? Okay. So this is not to shame anybody. This is to have an honest conversation about maybe looking at your kitchen from a different perspective so that it can serve you and your family in the most unique and organized way. So today we are streaming to the Ask a House Cleaner audience and also the Clutter Corner audience. So we've got two audiences here today, and I do want to invite you all to jump into the comments and ask your questions. We're going to cover as many of them today as we possibly can. But I'm super excited that you guys are joining me today, and I want to please offer a warm welcome to Katy Annulli. Katy, how are you today?
Good. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. All right, now you got to tell me really quickly. You are passionate about organizing and decluttering, and I want to know how that started, because most people don't just wake up one day and go, ta-da, I'm going to be like the world's greatest organizer. How did you become this?
Well, that didn't happen to me either. So I have a lot of anxiety, and I use organization as a tool to deal with my anxiety. So if I'm in a cluttered space, and I clear the space, organize it, I'm able to really focus. And so I got certified in professional organizing and learned additional tools to share with my clients. On how to get more organized, because it's not a skill that everyone has. And so it's something that I've become really good at and able to help people with. So I love sharing my skills and helping people get organized.
Now, as professional house cleaners, and one of the audiences that we have here today are professional house cleaners who go inside people's homes. And there are a lot of families that run into issues where they don't know how to declutter. And so they're asking the house cleaner. And so the house cleaners typically call professional organizers like yourself to come in and help out before we then start cleaning. So give us a little bit of insight, if you will, about the reasons that we have to declutter and organize our kitchen spaces before we can actually do a really great job at cleaning them.
Well, if there's a lot of clutter around, then you can't actually clean surfaces or clean behind appliances and things like that. So if your kitchen is organized and there's a place for everything, then you're able to clear the surfaces, clear the cabinets out somewhat, and put things away so that you're able to effectively clean the kitchen. And that's one of the reasons that people have a lot of clutter, is because they're not intentional about where they put things. So if something isn't assigned a home in your kitchen, then it probably is just going to end up on the counter or table, and then you can't actually effectively clean the area because there's clutter and random things on the counter.
I think that's common. And I just want to take a quick poll. Any of you that are watching us right now, if you have stuff that's on top of the horizontal surfaces, i.e. the countertops in your kitchen, right? Countertops in the notes. I'm just curious how many of you actually use that as a catch-all. I know sometimes I'm guilty of that when I come in from, grocery shopping or what have you. I just chunk everything on the counter, and then hopefully I go through it and I put it all away. But sometimes there's stuff that's, like right now, there's stuff on my kitchen counter. So guilty. I need to add counter into the notes there. Tell us how we clean our counters. Like, what is the process, if that is a catch-all for us?
Well, I think honestly, clearing out the other areas of the kitchen first is super important, because a lot of the times things end up on the counters because there isn't a place for them to go in the pantry or a drawer or a cabinet. So if you clear out the cabinets and the drawers and decide where the different categories in your kitchen are going to go, then the items on your counter or there then have a place to go, so that you don't just put them on the counter. So yeah, like having intentional places for things.
All right, so walk us through the kitchen, if you will. Let's say that you come into my kitchen and you say, okay, let's create some categories. And I know nothing about categories and I know nothing about where stuff's supposed to go. Where do I start?
So I would first talk to you about what is working in your kitchen, and what isn't working, and also what you're doing in the kitchen. So everybody's space is different. And so when I work with clients, I ask them a million questions, because it's really important to me that the systems that we set up are specific to that client, that family, and how they function in the space. So I evaluate those things and then go cabinet by cabinet, take everything out, wipe the cabinets down, determine if, if the mugs are in one cabinet, is your coffee machine on the total opposite side of the kitchen? Like, that doesn't necessarily make sense. So trying to put items near where you use them, and near like categories. So, and when you mentioned categories could be mugs, categories could be cooking utensils, pots and pans, things that you use together. So,
Mhm.
you would want to have like your coffee and tea near where your mugs are, so that there's less movement you have to do around the kitchen. And it also helps you to put things back where they go if there's less space in between where they're stored and where they're used.
Well, that's a great tip.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have limited space, let's say that you don't have a lot of drawers or cabinets and you have limited space, how do you make the category situation work?
So making use of the back of cabinet doors, hanging things on there, hanging things on the back of pantries, also using, sometimes people with small amount of storage will like put hooks on the bottom of a cabinet and hang their mugs on there. Just being really resourceful about space, using your wall space to hang, just kind of thinking outside of the box as far as where you can store things.
Hmm, I like that. So resourcefulness is a key to organization when you are sorting your kitchen in categories.
Yes.
So how many categories are there in a kitchen on average? Do you know? Or
Off
is
the
it
top,
different for every family?
yeah, I think it's different for everyone, because, and I think that's the importance of really thinking through, whether you're working with a professional organizer or you're just organizing your kitchen, thinking through what you really do in the kitchen, because some people, cook every single meal in the kitchen. Some people have kids, and so they want to have a category of kids plates or like kids snacks that the kids can access themselves. Whereas some people might eat out all the time. So where, they might just have like one pan and one pot or something like that. So it really depends on who's using the space. But I would just break it down into, categories as far as glasses. If you have like if you drink alcohol, like alcoholic, like beer, wine glasses together, having plates, bowls together, just the different, measuring cups and things like that. And small appliances together. But I think really thinking about how you use things together is helpful in creating those categories.
All right. Speaking about categories, I want to say hi to all of our friends. Sylvia, hi. How you doing today? We've got Rachel Rose from England. Hi, Rachel. We've got Muppet 929. Lots of smiles. Hi. How you doing? We've got Karen. Hello from Pasadena, California. We've got P.A. Wild Olive Branch. This says countertop. We've got counter. We have user chooser countertop. I know you guys, you're just like me. We're twins. We have lots of stuff on our countertops today as we're probably organizing our kitchens, it being the new year, right? I've got a lot of stuff pulled out of my cupboards right now for that very reason. My kitchen is well cluttered, but it's about 5 square meters and I'm too ill to sort it. That is a common interest for a lot of people where they are either disabled or they're ill or they're going through some issue, or it could be that they're caring for an elder parent or a sick child or something like that, and it is not a priority. And so I want to highlight the fact that a lot of us are in those same situations where there are reasons for having stuff on the countertops. So we have a Outlaw 254 following from Nairobi, Kenya. Hello. This is so exciting, you guys. I'm so glad that you're here. Rachel Rose says, I only have countertops and one under counter cupboard plus a small pantry plus shelves. This is a very common issue with people having a very, very limited amount of space. So I love the fact that she mentioned putting hooks underneath the cabinets, because a lot of times we put stuff in our counters and then we've got like this extra space where there's nothing there. Great place to hang mugs. I love that concept. Paul says, watching from Accra, Ghana. You guys, this is awesome. I'm so glad that you guys are here. I love my open shelves. I pop my mason jars on there. Needs regular dusting, but they're close. And I really do use the items on the shelves. And I love the fact that you're using what you have. That's a real key to keeping stuff in your kitchen, is using the stuff that you have. But Katy, tell us about stuff that we're not using that for some reason or another we've been hanging on to because, I don't know, maybe we think one day we're going to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I would just be super realistic about if you've used something, when was the last time you use it? In kitchens, in all our places in the home, but in kitchens in specifically, a lot of people are handed down dishes from grandparents or parents or people who have passed, or they're given gifts of platters or different things to entertain with. And I think that really being intentional about those things. So if you're holding on to your grandmother's platter, but you're never using it, you're not really honoring her by keeping it. So either using it on a regular basis. I'm really big on use your fine china, like use your fancy things all of the time, because we're living in the present and there's no better time than now. And so using those items, but also thinking about, if you're just feeling ashamed that you have these things in your kitchen, that's also not really honoring the person. And if they, they're not going to feel great about that. If someone gave you a gift and you're just holding on to it because you feel bad, then that's, it's not really benefiting anyone.
Well, I love that, because I think a lot of times when people give us gifts, if it's not something that they owned themselves and it's a new gift, like they went out and they bought a gift and they gave it to you, they don't have any emotional attachment to that gift because they have nothing invested in it other than the little money that they spent, or a lot of money that they spent, and the quick time that they gave it to you. So there's this quick interaction, and that's really all they have connected to that. So when I look at gifts that somebody gave me, if they come to my house and they're like looking around like, hey, where's that thing that I gave you? Chances are they're not going to remember, because they don't have a strong emotional attachment to it, because they didn't own it and they don't have a history with that thing. And
Yeah,
so
that's a really good point.
if it doesn't work for me, then how quickly can I regift that item? I know, for example, somebody gifted me some little Christmas trees that were made of sterling silver. And I was like, yay, this is awesome. but they tarnished very quickly because if you have silver and it's not in an airtight container, then it will oxidize and it discolors and whatever. So every time I went to use those, I would have to stop and polish them. They just became really high maintenance. So I said, I was doing just fine without these. I'm doing fine if I let them go. I don't need to hang on to them. And so I gave
Mhm.
them away to a thrift store or something. I just got rid of them. And so what kinds of things, and those were just Christmas trees, so those were seasonal anyway. But what kinds of things are you finding that your clients are ready and willing to get rid of that maybe they just don't use very often, or they're just kind of like extra items that we thought were cool because we saw it as seen on TV or something?
Yeah, I mean, I think like different types of appliances that or different gadgets that you can only use for one thing.
Mm,
Like juicers, for example, like everyone loves the thought of making juice, but most people don't like do it very rarely. It's can be super messy and hard to clean up. And it takes up a lot of space. So, different appliances and seeing if you can use one appliance for multiple uses instead of having, several appliances for individual uses. And I think, like
mhm.
you mentioned, as seen on TV, there's so many gadgets out there. Like, they have, like food storage containers that are shaped like vegetables. So like there's an avocado one or an onion one or specific to the vegetable. And it's like that is something that like you can use any type of food storage container to store your avocado. You don't need
Right.
one that looks like an avocado.
Well, and if it doesn't stack, then I would
Right.
say that's probably a red flag. If it doesn't stack or it's an odd shape or it doesn't sit on a shelf, for example, like a wire shelf, that would might be difficult to even store something like that.
Yeah,
And
that's a
so
great point.
is it possible that we can start making decisions about the kitchen storage containers, for example, before we even bring them into the home, instead of then trying to get rid of them after the fact?
Yes, yeah, I definitely think so. That's a great point as far as thinking about if things can stack, and also if you are going to go buy new food storage containers or bins for your pantry or bins for your cabinets, measuring first, and making sure that they're going to fit and take up a good amount of the space, so there's not wasted space.
Mhm.
And on that too, getting bins that are square and not a lot of the bins come down at an angle, but then there's
Mhm.
empty space. So if they're square, rectangular, you're able to fit more and make the best use of the space.
How do you feel about clear plastic containers so that you can see what's inside?
I think those are super helpful because a lot of times people forget what they have. And then, so they, if we're talking about a pantry, for example, people, if they can't see what's in there, they forget that they have a bag of rice and they just will buy a new one and then realize that they have another one. So I think clear containers are great and labels are also really great to be able to remember what's in your pantry.
And on those labels, do you also put dates?
On the like, if you had a container that was specific, like if you had a clear container with a top for rice, for example, yes, I would definitely put a date on there so that you remember like when the expiration is.
And is there a special way to do that other than, I mean, mine does not look like an Instagram pantry. Mine, I just use like painter's tape and I just rip off a piece and I write the date on it so that I know. And for me, it works. It's not
Yeah.
pretty or anything. And if you came into my pantry, you go, oh, this is awful, but it works because it's in a clear plastic container and then it has just the painter's tape on it with a little date.
Yeah, I mean, I probably would not think your pantry is awful, but I but I think, you brought up a really good point. Like social media puts this image of we need everything in clear bins with beautiful calligraphy labels, and it's just not realistic for a lot of people. And so I think just using what you have. So if you have painter's tape in your junk drawer and you're gonna use it, then great, use it. Because if making a label, like typing up a label and making it prevents you from putting the label on, then
Mhm.
what's the use of having labels? Because you're not going to do it.
Well, I love that. I love that. And using what you have and what you're going to follow through with, I think is a key because I'm not going to sit down and use a little label maker. My husband actually has a special little label maker that, you can type out and it comes out with some little decorative font or something. And he keeps saying, "Oh, I'm going to label everything in the house." And one day he'll get around to it. But in the meantime, I'm just using a Sharpie and a painter's tape, and it works because I can do it right then in real time. And like
Right.
you said, use what you have. There's enough food that comes prepackaged in reusable containers that if there's a reusable container that actually makes sense to keep, like as a screw-on lid, and it's pretty durable plastic or something that will last for a long time, I will use that for flour or rice or sugar or something like that, where I will just cut off the label from like a paper bag, like the
Mhm.
paper bag of flour, and I will just not it's not duct tape, but it's like packing tape, that clear
Yeah.
plastic tape. I'll just tape that on the front so that I can look at it and I can see what it is, but then it's in an airtight container so it prevents or it discourages like pests or rodents or things like that from getting into the pantry. Because I
Right.
know that it's really easy and we live on a property it just backs up to the forest. And so there are all kinds of little critters that would love to sneak in the house and look for food. And while we're really specific about not wanting that to happen, our job then is to put everything in airtight containers that then discourages that, you know?
Right. Yeah, and I think it's a common misconception that if you want to get organized, you have to spend a bunch of money on new bins and things like that. And I love the idea of using recyclable containers, because even, you know, Amazon, like Amazon boxes or boxes you get in the mail, like you can use cardboard boxes as bins as well and just put a label on it. It doesn't you'd have to cost a ton of money. And also, a lot of people who have tried to get organized at some point have a ton of bins. So, like,
Mhm,
one of the questions clients always ask me is like, okay, so what should I buy before you come? And I always say, don't buy anything. Like,
mhm.
one of the goals is to get rid of things, so hopefully we'll open up some bins, but also we end up finding bins throughout the organizing process that we can repurpose. And if someone, wants a pantry that's all matching bins, then we'll measure it and find bins that can do that, but it's definitely not necessary to spend a lot of money to get organized.
When you talk about organization, one of the things that I have found to be really helpful for the pantry, and this is kind of gross because I'm repurposing old plastic shoe boxes that had lids,
Hmm.
repurposing them to the pantry where now we're going to store food in them. So you can wash them like in the kitchen sink with like hot dishwater and so that they're nice and clean again. And you can store things like that. But as I've gotten rid of the shoes, I've saved the empty plastic shoe boxes and I've taken those into the kitchen to then store things like rice or beans or whatever, where you get like a 2 or 4 pound bag and it just goes right in there and you put the lid on it. And again, it's airtight and they stack really nicely in the pantry. So plastic shoe boxes work really, really well. And I want to highlight that as well. If you have, I don't know, some extra shoe boxes kicking around.
Yeah, and I think so too. It's, that's a great example. A lot of people, like, the Container Store is great, but there you can be really creative about, you don't need to use pantry bins for your pantry. There are tons of bins, you could buy at the dollar store that could you do the same exact thing as the more expensive bin. So I think being creative, is that I love that. I love that idea.
So as aside from the pantry, what other areas of the kitchen are catch-all areas that could really use a little bit of sprucing up during the new year as we're kind of trying to tidy up our kitchens and get organized?
Well, I think a junk drawer, like a kitchen junk drawer, is always a place that easily gets disorganized. And so, I mean, this goes for kind of any drawer, but what I always suggest for junk drawers is getting little boxes or drawer dividers so that you can have categories, because junk drawers, you need one. Like,
Mhm.
it's inevitable that it's going to be in your kitchen. So, having it organized is super helpful to be able to find things when you're looking for them. Because a junk drawer is a classic example of things just get lost, and then you need AA batteries and you can't find AA batteries, but you bought them at some point. So you go out and buy more AA batteries. So if you have, a box for batteries in the junk drawer, then you can easily go and find them. But that, like, the little bit boxes like that you get in the mail, or like you can repurpose any type of little boxes to use as bins for the junk drawer too.
Well, and I think that's really important because in the junk drawer, if you will, I know that we do have some little tiny containers. I think that we bought at the Dollar Tree, and they're just little plastic containers, and they're small enough as far as like the height that
Hmm.
the drawers will open and close with them in there. And we did fill up this entire drawer with these little tiny bins so that we would have, and I guess this is what you're calling categories. We did have one that had batteries in them, and that we didn't break up different ones for different batteries, but we had like the 9-volt batteries that you use in your carbon monoxide filters, and then we have AA batteries, which are not recyclable but rechargeable, and so that we use those in the remote controls, like for the TVs and the Game Boys and stuff like that. And then also little tiny round batteries that might
Hmm.
go inside, like the garage door opener and things like that. So there are a lot of household items that we have that all require batteries, and they're all inside that one little tiny container. And that's the one container that we go to look for whenever we need a battery for one of the remotes or something around the house. And so if you have a place for that, I think that's key. And then we also have other things like Scotch tape. And the Scotch tape is inside the also in one of those little containers, because wherever you are in the house, what do you know? You know that in that one drawer, it's got weird odds and ends that are like little twisty ties that you would use around cables or computer wires or things like that. And so all of that kind of stuff is inside one drawer. And so we don't have it in lots of drawers in lots of different areas of the house. It's all in that one drawer. And then we've got scissors and staplers and other kinds of weird, you would say they're office things, and maybe they don't belong in the kitchen, but because there's that one weird drawer of odds and ends, everybody knows where that weird drawer is, including our employees. And so whenever they need an odds and ends, everybody goes to that one drawer. And so that's where it goes.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, that's great. And like different office supplies really makes a lot of sense in that drawer. Because if you want like a notepad, pens because you're always writing little notes to whoever in the kitchen. And also, if you a lot of people process their mail in the
Uh-huh.
kitchen. So having those type of things, even stamps or envelopes, depending on, how big the drawer is. But, and again, like what you're using the space for. Those things can be great for the junk drawer.
Well, I think that's a really important thing. You mentioned stamps. We do have one that have stamps. We have one that has ink pens. So if we find ink pens around the house and they're just loose ink pens, they don't belong loose around the house, but they all go in that one little tiny elongated, bin where that's where we keep the extra ink pens. So post-it notes, like you said, we process mail. If it has to be paid at a certain time, a post-it note can go there. Also, because it's in the kitchen, if there's something, a note that you need to put on somebody's lunch, you can just make a post-it note, put it right there on the little vegetable container or what have you. It also is close enough to the garage. If you need to make a note, pick up something while you're out, that can go in the refrigerator. It can go out on the steering column of the car. It's just a great place to have everything in one spot. So I
Mhm.
love that. Tell us about other things that we would bring in from the house, from outside, backpacks, keys, purses, things like that that typically fall in the kitchen because we're coming in from the garage and it makes its way into the kitchen. What do we do with that stuff?
Yeah, I would have a certain if there's not like a mud room, or have like a certain area, even if it's just, one bin per kid so they can throw their backpack in there, just so it's contained. A lot of times spaces get disorganized because there's not a container for something, and so it's just on the floor. And this also is in line with being able to clean effectively, because if something is in a bin, it's easier to move it out of the way and clean under it, as opposed to if there's a backpack and a notebook and all this stuff that's fallen out of the backpack. So yeah, having either hooks or bins where kids or adults in the house know that's the designated spot for where keys go, or for where backpacks go and things like that.
That's a great tip. All right. So how about the refrigerator? I know the refrigerator is I don't want to say catch-all, because hopefully there's only food in there, but oftentimes we visit the refrigerator multiple times a day, hoping that new snacks have appeared. What's a great way for us to organize and maybe declutter our refrigerators?
Well, I think going through what's in there on a regular basis is super important, because especially for perishable foods, they can go bad fairly quickly. So going through those items on a regular basis and getting rid of any fruits or vegetables that have gone bad, and being diligent about, if you have leftovers, getting rid of them once you can no longer eat them if you haven't eaten them. But also checking expiration dates on a regular basis for your condiments and things like that. I know a lot of times condiments can get lost in the fridge, and they'll, you look at your mustard and all of a sudden it's from 2022 because you haven't used mustard in 2 years. But yeah, so just I think when you're actually decluttering it, taking everything out, wiping down the shelves, clear plastic bins for the refrigerator too are also super helpful. And it's helpful to keep things organized, especially if there are other people in your house. So if you're trying to, which most people live with other people, if you're trying to have everyone keep the fridge organized, having a specific area for fruit, a specific area for deli meats, and all of the leftovers go in this section and things like that, so that everybody is aware of what the system is, so that you can attempt to stay organized in the fridge.
Oh, I love that. One of the things that we have done in our house is shop from the fridge. So it's easy to want to go to the store and just buy new stuff, but there will be like a week where we say we're not going to grocery shop this week. We're going to eat from the pantry and eat from the fridge. We're just going to eat leftovers, whatever they are. And sometimes we have stuff that's in the freezer, and sometimes stuff doesn't go very well together. I remember one night we had 4 different types of squash for dinner, and that's all we had. But we ate it up, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't just sitting there, like maybe we weren't eating it as much as we should have, but we had 4 different types of squash. So we called it squash goulash, and we just had 4 different types of squash. So, but it's kind of fun and kind of weird and strange. But if you will eat the stuff that you have, it's a great way to recycle the food storage, instead of just having food storage that then you never eat, and you're saving it for a rainy day, and then it does expire and it goes bad, and then you don't, you just kind of wasted your money.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I do that too. And I live alone, so I like make food and then freeze some servings of it. So I go through periods where I eat from my freezer and just see, it's like the show Chopped. I love that show. And it's like, what ingredients do I have today? Like, what can I make? So, but I think really evaluating what's in your pantry, what's in your fridge, what's in your freezer before you go grocery shopping is critical to keeping your pantry and refrigerator organized, because you're exactly right. Because so many people just go to the store and buy what they want to eat that week, but they don't think about what's in their pantry. And then they end up throwing away a lot of food because they're not planning based on what's in their pantry. They're just planning on making whatever they feel like making. So, it's a great way to cut down on the volume of food that's in the kitchen.
I have a true confession. I don't cook. If I can heat something up in 2 minutes, yay, I don't cook. And so, going into my pantry, sometimes I have weird odds and ends that really don't go with anything. So what I started doing is I started pulling stuff out of the pantry, and then I started going to Chat GPT, and I would say, "I have this, 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 and this, and I'd like to make some food. Can you make me a recipe?" And it will say, "Well, yes, I can." And then it would make a recipe that would say, "Here's a delicious recipe with these ingredients, and you may want to add a little bit of salt and pepper or whatever." And so then I would try these little Chat GPT recipes that are made based on what's inside my fridge, my freezer, or my pantry. And I've had some really amazing little dishes that are really strange that I never would have found a recipe for, and I never would have thought to make this on my own. And so it's been kind of a fun game for me because my husband will say, "What is this?" I'm like, "Well, me and Chat made this little recipe for you." And so it's been really a lot of fun in just a weird, whimsical sort of way, but then helping us use those things before they go bad.
Yeah,
So,
that's a really great idea. I had someone talk to me about meal planning with Chat GPT. It's very similar to what you're saying, which I never thought about that before.
well, the tools that we have available to us are better tools than we've ever had before. But I think we're also in an era where, as a society, we are becoming more conscientious about the money that we spend. We're being more conscientious about the waste that we are throwing into landfills and garbage areas. We're becoming more conscientious of recycling. And so I think this is the year that we can really start making a difference by changing a few tiny things. So I love that we're having this conversation because when you are aware, you have choices. And
Right.
so just being aware that, hey, there are other ways that I can, feed my family, for example, than DoorDash or just buying new food 2 or 3 times a week, if you will, if we have stuff that's in storage. And then I want to make a comment about the storage. I know that a couple of years ago, there was a really big push to, get your food storage and buy 50-gallon barrels of whatever. And the reality is people were buying a lot of things that they don't eat right now. Like they were buying these MRE
Mhm.
vacuum packed meals and things like that, that they don't eat that right now. And so at what point in time do you have to wait until life is so bad that you're like, yes, I'm going to eat a little, just add water meal, and then it appears? But
Mhm.
there are things that we can buy that we are eating right now. And so, for example, like a can of soup, there are lots of cans of soup that if you are eating canned soup right now, that might be a good food storage item where you pull the top of it. Maybe you don't need a can opener to open it. Maybe you don't need water to mix with it in order for it to be edible. Maybe you don't need to heat it up. We don't know what the extreme circumstances are, but if there's no electricity, you can't heat your oven. If there's no water and there's no water to add with it, that might be a really good choice rather than a vacuum packed meal that needs water to be reunited with to its
Mhm.
original source. So just start thinking in terms of under what circumstances am I going to use this? And then how often can you recycle it? So instead of buying new food and saving the old food storage, can you eat from the food storage and buy something new that then goes back into storage so that you're recycling them? Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And on that too, it's you're more if you eat it while it's still good, then you're not going to end up throwing it away, adding to the landfill, and wasting your money, or the money that you had previously spent.
Tell me about spices. How do people organize their spices?
So I love spices in drawers. So I think it's a great way to be able to see the spices that you have. There are also some newer kitchens have pull out spice cabinets on a lower drawer, so so there are shelves. It's kind of like the size of like where cookie sheets or cutting boards would go, but it pulls out. And so you can put spices on there, spice racks on the counter or mounted on a wall. And then also spice racks in cabinets that are tiered so that you can see the what spices are in there, because spices very often get lost. You can't remember what you have. You can't find what is in the back. So either having shelf risers or a tiered spice shelf is super helpful to be able to see all of the spices that you have.
That's a really good suggestion. Do you use Lazy Susans for anything?
Lazy Susans can be great for spices as well as like oil and vinegar and things that you're, grabbing more often. So whether it's in a cabinet or just like right by your stove, those kind of oil, vinegar, salt, pepper, the things that you grab every time you cook. Lazy Susans can be super helpful for that as well.
And for those of you that are joining us that are not familiar with the term Lazy Susan, it's a little tiny round plate. They come in, I don't know, maybe 6 or 9 or 12 inches, and they have a wheel on the bottom of them, and they sit flat, and they have a little lip around them so that you can put things on them, and then you spin it around, and then what is at the back comes around to the front so that you can access it easily. So I'm a really big fan of Lazy Susans, and I like to also put them inside the refrigerator for condiments and things like that, so that instead of something being in the very back of the kitchen shelf in the refrigerator, you can spin it around, and then all the items that you, let's say salad makings, for example, all of the vinegars and the salad dressings and all those things can be then spun around, and you can reach them easily and put them back and then spin it back. And that way it's easily accessible to you. So that's another option as well.
Mm-hmm.
So are there any misconceptions that people have about cleaning their kitchens that you would give suggestion or advice to?
Common misconceptions. I mean, I think that just having less and really like being able to clean out your cabinets and your drawers on a regular basis is super important. Specifically for what you mentioned before, critters, bugs, rodents, and things like that love the kitchen. So if you have less in the kitchen or you organize it on a regular basis, you're able to really clean those different areas that bugs, food particles may fall into, and bugs may easily find. But I think also like making sure you're pulling out the stove every few months and vacuuming under there. If you can move the fridge, like trying to vacuum underneath as much as possible, because there are, pieces of food can be super small and find their way into all different areas in the kitchen. So just making sure it's the maintenance and doing it on a regular basis is really important.
Speaking of which, and this is a cleaning tip that I found and I don't have any nearby me, but there are some reusable, what's the best way to say, they're reusable cloths. They're really, really fine, and you can reuse them a multiplicity of times. They're kind of like paper towels, but they're a little bit thicker. And you can take those and you can wrap those around a yardstick. And a yardstick is usually about 3.5 feet long, 3 feet long. And you can stick it underneath your stove or your refrigerator. And if you just swish it back and forth with that on there, and usually the reusable cloth is wet, and so it will pick up any dust or any debris or crumbs or anything like that. And it's also skinny enough. A yardstick is skinny enough that you can poke it down the sides of the refrigerator or the sides of the oven. And you can usually get all the way back there to the back, and then just kind of wipe the little tiny area where all kinds of junk and crumbs get in there. And you don't really have any tools that will like fit back in there, but you can see like some stuff has fallen. That's a really great tip that you can get underneath the refrigerator and the stove without pulling it out.
Yeah.
So that's,
I love that.
Well, and it's very helpful because again, if we're talking about preventing critters and things from getting in our homes, the cleaner we keep the area, the less likely if they do come in, they're going to stay. And
Right.
if they don't find food and they don't find happiness in your house, they're not going to tell all their friends like, "Hey, I hit the jackpot. All of y'all come on in," right? They're going to go
Yeah.
somewhere else. So,
I wanted to, Maggie had a question about any advice for short people. And I just want to address that because I think this is a common issue that I run into with clients of forgetting what's on the top shelves or not being able to reach them. So I think one, having a step stool in your kitchen, super important, but also if you um, either put a label or a list like on the inside of the cabinet to remind you of what's on the top shelves so that you can access them if you need them.
that's a really great tip, and I love that because the knowing where stuff is will save a lot of time and energy. I'm using a hang on. I'm using a new app that I just started using in the last couple of weeks, and I'm looking it up. It's called Itemtopia, and it's not free. It's about $80 a year. But I figured that the $80 a year is worth less than the wasted time I'm spending looking for stuff. And what you do is you're walking through your house and you take a picture of it and then you give it a location. So you can say this is in the kitchen cupboards, or this is in the storage unit, or this is in the kitchen, this is in the pantry, this is in the office, wherever. And so you give it a home. And so if something belongs in your car, for example, let's say that you have a little tote that you put in the back of your car that you use for groceries. That's where it belongs. So where is that tote? Instead of you going looking for it, did I take it in the laundry room? Is it in the kitchen? Did I carry it in the house? Did I put it out in the garage when I was emptying the groceries out of it with the outside refrigerator? There's a place for it. And so anybody in your home, you can share that same list with. So if somebody in your home is looking for something, and this is especially helpful if you're helping like elder parents, for example, and they have stuff, and maybe you're helping them. Is some of their stuff at your house? Is some of the stuff at their house? Is it in their storage unit? Like, where is it? Do they have a second home? So the more complicated our lives get, this helps streamline the looking for things. So before you then go to the store and you say, hey, where is that thing? And we're talking about back to Maggie's question about for short people. This is good for short people and for tall people. When you have an item and it goes on your phone, it's an app on your phone. And so when you just click on it, you can go, I know exactly where this is. And if it's something that is up tall in a cupboard that you can't reach and you don't have a step stool, you can have a list of all the things that are in that top shelf. And then when you have a relative that comes over or a neighbor that's taller, you can say, listen, there are 6 things that I need. Can you reach them while you're here? And I know that there are some elder people that we're working with right now. That's exactly what they do. And so they say, oh, hey, I have a tall friend coming over and I need these 6 things. And they open up their app and they can get those 6 things because they're not going to remember the 6 things when that friend or relative comes to visit.
Yeah, that's an excellent suggestion.
Well, it's helping me right now to organize because I'm guilty. I'm sure I'm the only one. I'm sure nobody does this, but I forget what I have, or I know that, hey, it's going to take me too long to find it. So I'll just go buy another one.
Mm-hmm.
And then by the time I start organizing and decluttering, I find out I have 4 and 5 of the same thing.
You're not the only one.
I'm not the only one that does that. I hate when I do that though, because I've been decluttering. I've been finding 4, 5, 6 of something. And I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, so that's the reason that I bought the app, because I wanted to start streamlining the stuff that I have. Because if I know where it is and I can, it's just in the other room, then I can go in the other room and get it. Now I know where it is.
Right.
I tell you, I'm making myself crazy. All right, so back to the kitchen. A lot of times we spend a lot of time in the kitchen with recipe books and, I don't know, magazines, things like that. How do we organize those in our kitchen? And is it better just to get rid of all that kind of stuff? Like How do we make that work in our kitchens?
I mean, I think it is a matter of being realistic about how often you're actually using the recipe book. A lot of people now, look up recipes on Pinterest or another site, and you're, going from your phone or from your iPad when you're making the recipe. So if you're using the books, that's great. And just, it's more of putting them in a place where you're going to be able to access them. And but cookbooks can also be if you have like open shelving, or you have like glass doors over some of the cabinets. Recipe books can look really nice in there. But I think, yeah, just being realistic about if you're using them, and if it makes sense to have, maybe they're going to go on a really high shelf because you don't use them that often. So just being realistic about your use of the books.
Being realistic about the use of the books is a really good suggestion, because I bought a Vitamix probably about 10 years ago, and I use it twice a day. So I use it all the time. But it came with this really expensive cookbook, or whatever you want to call it, a recipe book for making smoothies. And I promise I've never opened it even once. But it's a really fancy book. And because I spent so much money on the Vitamix, I felt obligated to keep this really expensive cookbook. So I was going through my stuff this last week, and I had this book in my hand, and I'm thinking, should I keep this book? And I imagined in my head, oh yes, the day is going to come. Like one day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have this like displayed on my counter, and I'm going to be making one of these delicious recipes. And I'm like, Angela, what are you thinking about? You're never going to do that. In 10 years, you never once opened that book. Like, when is this magical day going to come that you're going to use this book? And I'm like, well, but they've got really good recipes in them. Like, there's recipes for soup, there's recipe, but Angela, you've never used it yet. And I'm like, you're right, I've never used it. And I didn't want to let go of it because it was expensive. And I'm hanging on to this really expensive Vitamix. It's not a cookbook because there's nothing to cook. It's a recipe book for smoothies. Yeah. And as I thought about it, I thought, I'm going to give myself permission to let go of this book, because how do I cook? How do I cook? And how I cook is this. You talk about people looking up recipes online. When I use a recipe, I actually go to the internet and I type in the word killer before the food. So like killer potato salad, or killer macaroni and cheese, or whatever. And then it pulls up like these 5-star recipes, and then I make it for that event, and then I'm done with it.
Right.
I'm done with it. So there is no recipe book. I don't have recipe books. I don't use recipe books. And then I was like, this magical day is never coming. Get rid of the book already, Angela. And it's a really thick, fat book. And I'm like, I'm storing this for what? For a rainy day that will never come for me.
Right.
And I let go of the book.
That's great. And now, I mean, and it's opened up space for another cookbook that you will use, or something else in the kitchen. And I think too, with, smoothies, if you can also look up smoothie recipes online. And if like Pinterest is a really great solution for people who like to save recipes, because it's pretty much, you can create a board of smoothie recipes or soups or whatever it might be. But then you can still go back and reference them if you do want to make them again.
So Susie Mueller says, haha, I also have a Vitamix cookbook that I haven't used. So me and Susie are twins. And then Karen says, I have old cookbooks I collected for 40 years that I rarely use, all stored in a cabinet I rarely use. Hard for me to toss. So I think I'm not alone here. Maggie says, my geek daughter told me that. Don't need cookbooks, Mom. And you know what? I'm starting to think that there is probably, I don't know, maybe a better way for us to get rid of some of this stuff, because maybe if we're not using it and we never are going to, maybe now's the time.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay, so I'm not alone. Thank you guys for validating that I'm not alone in my search here of cleaning out my kitchen. So I am in the process right now of going through a lot of my cupboards, and I think because it is a new year and I'm trying to turn over my organization, I want to do better this year than I did last year. I've started getting rid of things that are valuable, but that I don't use a lot. And there are things like muffin tins. I have, I don't know, 20 muffin tins, and they're all brand new and they're all like that what do you call it? The non-stick, you know.
Hmm.
And when I asked myself, when is the last time you made muffins, Angela? I remember I got really, really angry because I made like these little muffin things for a party, and it took like 4 hours to make. They were very decorative and they were beautiful and they tasted delicious, and they so were not worth the time and investment that I put into it. And I said, I will never make those again. So I never made them again. But yet I hung on to all these little muffin tins. And they're like little tiny muffin tins, like those little baby, like little
Hmm.
bite-sized muffin. Who eats those little bite-sized muffins? And I'm like, I could just go buy some at Costco or something. I'm not gonna make them again. So I've got all these really nice, expensive muffin tins. And because I spent all this money on these muffin tins, I think I bought them at Michael's or something. I don't know what I was thinking. Um, but I got like 40 of them, and I'm probably never going to use them again. So do I store them or do I let them go?
Well, I think it's thinking about, how if you do make muffins, how many are you gonna make? Like, I think people often have a lot of cupcake um tins, but it's, if you make a dozen cupcakes at a time or a dozen muffins at a time, you don't need 40 of them. Or and if you let them go, you can open up space for something else or just have open space. And, if you do find a time where you need to make 40 muffins, I feel like at this point, like you said, you're going to go out and buy them. You're not going to make them again. But if you do want to buy them, you could buy tins. But a lot of times people hold on to things that they think they might use that didn't didn't cost a lot of money, or they could replace it for not a lot. So I really suggest, like letting go of things that you're not using often, and if you do need it, you like going out and purchasing it at that specific time that you need it, as opposed to holding on to it for years and years and years and it taking up valuable space in your kitchen.
Well, I'll be truthful with you. What I have in my kitchen is not realistic for me, but it's a lifestyle. In my head, I bought a lifestyle. I envisioned myself with this apron on, and I'm standing in my kitchen and I'm cooking things and I'm making, little cupcakes or little muffins or what have you. But that's actually not my lifestyle at all. I don't actually do that. In my head, it was the illusion. And I bought into the illusion of like the really nice fancy Vitamix cookbook. Like one day I'm going to get up on a Saturday morning and I'm going to have this, cookbook open and I'm going to be making some kind of berry smoothie or something. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. And so in the back of my head, it's like a lifestyle that if I get rid of the cookbook, I'm getting rid of this magical lifestyle that is pretend that I was going to have that I really don't have at all. If I wake up early on a Saturday morning, I'm going to the computer and I'm going to write my next book. That's what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to be making, bakery items in my kitchen. I'm not going to do that.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think
So,
people do hold on to things for a lot of different reasons, but one reason being that's what we're quote unquote supposed to do, or that's what social media is saying is popular, what we're supposed to be doing. But um I think a big mind shift of like what you're saying is being realistic about your lifestyle, being realistic about how you're using your kitchen and what you're doing in it. And not, you know, my my mom used to bake cakes one, not mine specifically, but as an example, if your mom used to bake cakes once a week or something like that, and so you think that you need to have all these different types of cake pans because you're going to bake once a week, but you've never baked a cake in your life, then it's like being really honest with yourself. And there's no shame in not baking and not cooking. It's how you're living. And so, what I thinking about creating your home to support how you live as opposed to buying a lot of stuff and then it just kind of cluttering up the kitchen.
Well, all right. I think you've helped me be more honest with myself. Man, I hate this, but I'm so glad we're having this conversation. I think what I'm hearing from our conversation today is that to be really honest about the lifestyle that you have, instead of the lifestyle that you are going to pretend you have inside your head because it's fanciful, but yet not realistic for you now or ever, or maybe it never was, that it's okay to clear out some of that stuff and let it go, because hanging on to it just because it's a fancy illusion doesn't give you more space in your kitchen, and it doesn't really honor the lifestyle that you do have. And you can't be truly authentic who you are if you're tripping over a lifestyle that's imagined, that is taking up space in all your cupboards and kitchen and cluttering up your space, because that's not who you are, and it really doesn't fit in with what you have, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great.
All right, so this is going to be the year of honest truths. I love it. Our time is up for today. Katie, this has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I really want to thank all you guys that have jumped in and said hi. JLP, hi. Karen, hi from San Diego. I'm a collector of many things, including cookbooks. I'm doing my best to let things go, keep my favorites. Maggie, thank you so much for the conversation. And Karen, so true. Got to be realistic. Thank you guys so much for joining us here today. And Katie, tell our listeners where they can go to find you and possibly get in touch with you to have you walk through their kitchens with them individually, virtually.
Yeah, so my website is kmaorganizing.com. I also have an Instagram and Facebook that are both KMA Organizing. And I do offer virtual organizing sessions where we'll come up with an action plan together. So if anyone's interested, I'd love to have a chat with you.
This was so informative, and I really enjoyed our chat today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you, Katie, for being here and for your wisdom. And we will see you again, same time, same place next week. Thank you.
Thank you.